Hello again. So this will be part 2 of our story. Who's ready to find out how it happened for the Easter Bunny on her first Easter? Okay, let's read to find out. The next evening, Cottontail knocked on the big front door and was admitted to the palace. There she stood in her funny country clothes. But none of the other 4 Easter bunnies laughed, for they were wise and kind, and they knew better. Okay? And there's the palace right there. Do you see it? See little Cottontail at the door? I wonder how her first time as Easter Bunny is going to go. The other rabbits showed her all over the palace, from room to room, all piled high with eggs of gold and silver, and eggs that glittered like snow, chocolate eggs, marshmallow eggs, eggs for rich children, eggs for poor children, for children who were sick and children who were well, all over the world. Look at all those Easter eggs. Look at how fancy those ones in the front are. Do you see those? Then, as soon as it was dark enough for the children to be asleep, all over the world, the old, wise, kind grandfather gave the word, and the 5 bunnies set to work as fast as they could. First one, then another, would take up a large egg or a pretty little basket, and in a single hop they would be out of the palace and out of sight. Then, in a moment, he would be back again, and before you could say Jack Robinson, he would have whisked away again. Slowly the night wore away, and the bunnies began to look tired as they kept returning for more and more eggs. And in the palace, the glittering piles of eggs grew smaller and smaller. Poor little Cottontail was very tired, for this was the first time she had ever gone so far or so fast in her life, and she was beginning to hope that she could soon take the little basket that was set aside for her own children and go hopping home, when old, wise, kind grandfather called her to him. When she went close, she saw that he was holding in his paw the loveliest egg she had ever seen. It glittered like a diamond. "Peek through and see what you shall see," he said. It seems like he chose her for this special job. Look at how fancy that egg is. So Cottontail peeked through the little hole in one end, and she saw a beautiful scene with a sleigh and a lake and people skating on the ice. And he said, "Because you have such a loving heart for children, I am going to give you the best, but the hardest trip of all. Far off, over 2 rivers and 3 mountains, there is a great mountain peak. And in a little cottage on that peak is a little boy who has been ill for a whole year. And he has been so brave that never once has he cried or complained. The mountain is so high that there is ice on the top, and it will be hard to climb. But if you get there, you will give more happiness than any other Easter bunny." Cottontail picked up the egg very gently and went hopping away on her journey. She crossed the first river and then the second. She went over the first mountain and then another mountain, and yet another, until at last she reached the highest mountain of all. Ooh, that looks pretty steep, doesn't it? She's pretty brave. Do you see it? Cottontail was very tired when at last she got to the bottom of the great peak, and her heart failed her when she saw how high it was and how slippery with ice and snow on top. But holding the egg very carefully, she started hopping up. At last she reached the ice and snow, and now she was almost to the top, and she could see the little cottage all covered with snow where the little boy was sleeping. But then a terrible thing happened. Oh, she's almost to the top there. Oh no, I hope she doesn't fall. Her foot slipped, and down she came. Downward she flew into snowdrifts. Then she left the ice and snow, and rolling and bouncing against the stones, she felt the air getting warmer. So she must have fallen quite a long distance. There was no ice and snow at the bottom there. Down, down she went, and she crashed through a thicket of budding laurel, rolled across a pasture, and finally struck against the trunk of a great apple tree that was just getting ready to bloom for Easter. And there she lay, with the egg still safely clutched in her paw, but with a great pain in her leg. She tried to rise again because she saw a lovely pink light in the sky, and she knew that in a few minutes more it would be day, and the little boy would be sad if she did not get this egg to him. But the pain was so bad she fell down. You see her there against the tree. See the pink in the background? It's going to be the sunrise soon, so she's got to hurry up. But then she felt something touch her shoulder, and she looked up, and there, right before her, way off there in that distant land, was old, wise, kind Grandfather Bunny. And he smiled at her and said, "You are not only wise and kind and swift, but you are also the bravest of all the bunnies. And I shall make you my very own gold shoe Easter Bunny." And he reached over, and she saw for the first time that he was holding a tiny pair of gold shoes in his hand. And he bent down and put them on her feet. Suddenly all the pain left her leg, and she stood up and picked up the precious egg. Do you see the gold shoes he has behind his back? I wonder how Grandfather Bunny got there so quickly. Then, before she knew what was happening, Cottontail felt a sudden motion, and she found herself flying high in the air. Over the pasture she flew, over the laurel, over the stones, until at last, when she landed, she looked back and saw that with one single head jump had carried her halfway up the mountain. So those shoes must make her able to fly. Then she jumped once again, and there she was at the cottage door. Quickly she squeezed through the tiny crack that had been left open, just in case the bunny did come all that way. You see her up there at the top? And in the hand of the beautiful sleeping boy, she placed the egg. See the boy sleeping? She made it just in time. Then, just as the Easter morning sun rose over the edge of the world, she jumped quickly back to the palace, where she found her own little basket for her own little bunnies and went hopping back home to give them a happy Easter. Mother Cottontail found that the garden was tended, and sure enough, just as she had said, everything was in order. The floors were swept, and there were 2 lovely new pictures painted and hanging on the wall. The dishes were washed and shone in the cupboard. The clothes were washed and mended and nicely hung away. And her 21 children were all sound asleep in their little beds. And the little house of Mother Cottontail can always be told now from the homes of other bunnies, because in a very special place on the wall, on a very special hook, hangs a pair of very tiny little gold shoes. Boys and girls, Mrs. Rumsey hoped you enjoyed this story, and I wish you and your families a wonderful Easter if you celebrate, and I hope to see you sometime soon. Missing you all. Bye-bye.